France, January 1945. Winter was cruel, and snow mixed with mud, stained by the blood of thousands of men. At the Colmar Pocket, American troops were surrounded by German forces far superior in number and firepower. Among them was a 19-year-old boy, frail, youthful in appearance but with steel determination. His name was Audie Murphy. That day, his company was about to be annihilated. German tanks advanced, machine guns roared relentlessly, and the order was to retreat. But Murphy did the unthinkable. He ordered his men to fall back and stayed behind, alone. He climbed onto a burning tank destroyer, grabbed the .50 caliber machine gun, and for nearly an hour faced the enemy. The boy from Texas became a fortress of fire and courage. Around 50 enemy soldiers fell. Tanks were repelled, and when he finally climbed down, wounded in the leg, he gathered his men and led a counterattack. At that moment, Audie Murphy was no longer just a soldier. He was the very embodiment of American resistance. Before he was a soldier, Audie Murphy was just a poor boy from rural Texas. Born in 1925, he was one of 12 children in a family that barely had enough to eat. Life in Hunt County offered no luxury, only hard work, farming, and the daily struggle for survival. His father, an alcoholic and absent, abandoned the family too early. The burden fell on his mother, Josie, to raise the children alone. Audie grew up fast, not because he wanted to, but because he had no choice. By age 10, he was already helping to support the household. Hunting became his school. With an old rifle, Audie spent hours in the fields bringing down rabbits, squirrels, and deer. Not for sport, but to put food on the table. His aim became legendary. They said he could hit a squirrel's head from dozens of yards away, wasting no meat. Inside that frail boy hid a skill that would one day change history. But his childhood was also marked by pain. In 1941, he lost his mother, the only stable figure he had. For Audie, it was like losing the ground beneath his feet. With no father and no mother, he was left to provide for his younger siblings. By 16, he was no longer just a boy. He was an adult forged by hunger, responsibility, and the harshness of country life. And it was from this reality that the soldier was born, a young man who had learned early on that survival depended on precision, resilience, and quiet courage. With his mother's death and the responsibility of raising his siblings, Audie Murphy's life seemed destined to be just another among millions in rural Texas. But in December 1941, everything changed. The attack on Pearl Harbor set America ablaze. Young men everywhere rushed to enlist. Audie wanted to answer the call too, but there was a problem. He was only 16. Rejected at first for being too young, too short, and too light, Murphy did not give up. He falsified his age and tried again and again. The Army dismissed him, the Navy refused him, even the Marines said he wasn't big enough. But he persisted. Audie wasn't big in size, but he had something greater inside him: fierce determination. Finally, in 1942, at just 17 years old and weighing barely 110 pounds, he was accepted into the Army. He was assigned to the 3rd Infantry Division, a unit that would face some of the fiercest battles of the war. The frail Texas boy, who many said would never make a soldier, was about to prove that courage isn't measured in inches or pounds, but in the willpower to face the impossible. In 1943, young Audie Murphy crossed the Atlantic with his division. The destination: Sicily. It was the Allies' first major step to liberate Europe from Nazism. For many American soldiers, the shock was immediate. The beaches were defended by machine guns, artillery, and veteran Axis troops. But for Murphy, this was only the beginning of a path marked by courage. Right on landing, he demonstrated deadly precision. While others hesitated under enemy fire, Murphy advanced calmly, aiming and striking targets with the same composure he had when hunting in the hills of Texas. His officers quickly noticed this boy had something different. In the Italian campaign, he faced brutal combat in freezing mountains and ruined villages. At Anzio, one of the bloodiest battles of the Italian front, Murphy spent entire days in muddy trenches under constant bombardment. Many succumbed to fear, but he stood firm. In 1944, he landed in southern France during Operation Dragoon. There, once again, he shined. With only a handful of men, he ambushed a German unit, capturing dozens of prisoners. His bravery earned him decorations, but more importantly, the unconditional respect of his comrades. From Sicily to France, Audie Murphy was transforming. From a doubted recruit, he was becoming a living legend among his men. But the act that would place him forever in history was yet to come. January 1945. The cold was brutal. The ground of Alsace in eastern France was covered in snow and mud. The Colmar Pocket offensive was one of Germany's last desperate attempts to hold back the Allied advance. Audie Murphy's company was surprised by tanks and enemy infantry. The Germans were numerous, well-armed, and determined to break the American line. Many of Murphy's men began to retreat, but not him. Audie ordered his men to fall back to cover, while he stayed at the front, alone. In front of him was an M10 tank destroyer, already hit and in flames. Most would have run. Murphy climbed onto the burning vehicle, grabbed the .50 caliber machine gun, and opened fire. For nearly an hour, he held his ground under relentless artillery and machine gun fire. German tanks advanced, only to retreat under the Texans' unyielding assault. Enemy soldiers fell one by one, about 50 in total. Murphy was hit in the leg but did not stop. He kept firing until the ammunition was gone. When he finally climbed down from the burning tank, he gathered his men and led a counterattack that drove the Germans back and secured the position. He was only 19 years old. For this almost superhuman act, Audie Murphy received the Medal of Honor, the United States' highest military decoration. That day, the frail boy from Texas became the most legendary soldier of World War II. After Colmar, Audie Murphy was no longer just a hero of the 3rd Infantry Division. He had become the ultimate symbol of the American soldier. In total, Murphy received 33 military decorations, including every major combat valor medal the United States had to offer. The highest of all was, of course, the Medal of Honor, awarded for his lone stand atop the burning tank. But that wasn't all. He also earned the Distinguished Service Cross, 2 Silver Stars, the Legion of Merit, 2 Bronze Stars with V for Valor, and 3 Purple Hearts for the wounds that nearly took him out of combat. His feats did not go unnoticed beyond U.S. borders. France awarded him the Croix de Guerre and the Médaille Militaire. Belgium also decorated him for bravery. Audie Murphy was now an international hero, respected even by generals who had spent decades in battle. What made it even more extraordinary was his age. In 1945, when the war ended, Murphy was only 20 years old. A Texas boy once rejected by the military for being too small had become the most decorated soldier of World War II. To the American people, he wasn't just a name in military reports. He was living proof that courage, discipline, and faith could turn even the most unlikely man into a legend. In 1945, when World War II ended, Audie Murphy returned to the United States not just as a veteran, but as a living legend. Newspapers hailed him as America's most decorated soldier. His photo was on magazine covers. Crowds gathered to see him. Politicians wanted to shake his hand. Generals saluted him, and civilians saw him as the perfect example of an American hero. But reality for Murphy wasn't so glorious. Inside him, the war had never ended. Nightmares, memories of blood, and the faces of the fallen haunted him night after night. At the time, there wasn't even a term for post-traumatic stress disorder, let alone proper treatment. Murphy fought in silence against an invisible enemy. Despite it all, he tried to adapt to civilian life. He refused to see himself as a hero, always saying, "The real medals belong to those who never came back." Hollywood soon came knocking. Directors and producers saw in Murphy the chance to turn his story into film. But for Audie himself, being under the spotlight was uncomfortable. He wasn't looking for fame. He was looking for peace. Still, it was impossible to escape. America wanted to know every detail of his journey. This contrast, the public glory and the private pain, would define Murphy's post-war life. A man who had defeated armies but continued to fight silent battles within himself. After the war, Audie Murphy's fame grew to a point where he could no longer hide. Hollywood wanted to bring his story to the screen. To many, he was the perfect hero. Young, charismatic, and with a story almost too incredible to be true. Murphy accepted the offers, though not without reluctance. He never felt comfortable as a celebrity. To him, acting was just a way to provide for his family and, in some way, tell the truth about war. Over 2 decades, he starred in more than 40 films, mostly westerns and war dramas. But in 1955 came the pinnacle, the release of To Hell and Back, based on his autobiography. In the film, Murphy played himself. The frail Texas boy once rejected by recruiters was now reenacting his own battles on screen. The film became Universal's biggest box office success up to that time. Millions of Americans flocked to theaters to witness the true journey of a young soldier who had faced hell and returned alive. Audiences weren't just watching an actor. They were watching a man who had really been there, who had really done it. It was the perfect mix of reality and legend. Yet, for Murphy, Hollywood never erased his scars. Behind the lights, he continued to battle the darkness the war had left inside him. Hollywood could applaud, newspapers could call him a legend, but when the lights went out and the house grew quiet, Audie Murphy fought battles no one could see. The war had ended in 1945, but inside him, it had never left. Audie suffered from what we now call post-traumatic stress disorder. At the time, the term didn't even exist. Soldiers with such symptoms were called weak or said to have shaken nerves. But for Murphy, the reality was much darker. Insomnia, violent nightmares, bouts of paranoia. At night, he slept with a loaded pistol at his bedside, fearing attacks that existed only in his mind. Alcohol often became an escape, as did isolation. Despite his fame and Hollywood success, he felt out of place, as if he were still trapped in the trenches of Europe. And, perhaps most importantly, he didn't hide it. Murphy was one of the first American veterans to speak openly about the traumas of war, breaking the silence in a time when such confessions were taboo. He would say, "The real price of war is not just in those who die on the battlefield, but in those who keep fighting after they come home." By sharing his pain, Audie Murphy gave a voice to thousands of veterans who suffered in silence. He turned his own anguish into a banner of awareness, showing that even the greatest heroes were still human. Audie Murphy died young in 1971 in a plane crash. He was only 45, but his name, his story, and his example had already been etched forever into American memory. His grave lies at Arlington National Cemetery, one of the most visited in the United States. Every year, thousands of veterans, young soldiers, and civilians pay respects before the simple headstone he requested, without special distinction, because, in his words, the real heroes are the ones who didn't come back. Hospitals and schools bear his name, such as the Audie L. Murphy Memorial VA Hospital in Texas, a symbol of care for those who, like him, carried the war within them. His autobiography remains a reference, and his film To Hell and Back is still revisited as one of the greatest stories of courage ever brought to cinema. More than medals, Murphy left behind a human legacy. He was a hero on the battlefield, but also one of the first to raise his voice for veterans suffering in silence. He showed that courage isn't only about facing armed enemies, it's also about fighting your own ghosts and still standing tall. Today, Audie Murphy is remembered as the most decorated U.S. soldier of World War II, but also as the symbol of the American citizen soldier, an ordinary man who, when called, did the extraordinary. His life is an eternal reminder that greatness is not found in the pursuit of glory, but in duty fulfilled. Audie Murphy proved that even the most unlikely hero can change the fate of a nation. Audie Murphy was born in a poor Texas cabin. He was rejected by the Army for being too small. He spent his childhood hunting to survive and lost his mother far too soon. Nothing, absolutely nothing, suggested he would become America's greatest war hero. And yet, at Colmar, at just 19 years old, he stood alone against tanks and machine guns, holding his ground when everyone believed it was impossible. He received more medals than any other soldier of World War II, but his greatest victory was transforming his pain into a legacy of courage and humanity. Audie Murphy reminds us that true greatness is not born from size, but from the courage to act. He did not fight for glory. He fought out of duty, for his comrades, for a nation at war, and in doing so, he showed the world that even the most unlikely can become eternal. Did you enjoy this story? Subscribe to the channel and comment which story you'd like to see next. Together, we'll keep uncovering how ordinary men wrote extraordinary pages of history.